Hi guys, Forgotten Wolf here, and we are finally back with the Game of Thrones book predictions. I will be doing my Dream of Spring predictions very differently compared to my Winds of Winter predictions. I'm only going to be doing 3 parts for Dream of Spring, and I'll be separating it by how they have an order, not by a house, and how I think it will take place, not by house or character. Today is the opening section of the book, the first third. Part 2 will be the ends of the wars down south, and Part 3 will be the climax, the battle for Winterfell, or when the long night comes again. This took months of research and careful planning. So please like, share, subscribe, and let's begin. I'll skip over the whole prologue and save it for part 3, but first is Bran 1. Bran 1 is the very first chapter of the whole series, and I have zero doubt that George will do the same with the last book, a callback to what started everything. Bran 1 is Bran watching Jon execute Night's Watch deserter. Jon is the king in the north now, and a Stark by royal decree thanks to Robb. Bran is joined by Arya watching, and Bran watching his father Ned Stark execute Night's Watch is the very first chapter, which makes everyone realize how we've come full circle. Like in Book 1, the Night's Watch deserter tells us about the White Walkers before Jon executes them. It's a nice chapter meant to call back to the past. Next up is kind of a series of reactions to the last book. First up is Sam 1, where we get a reaction from Sam as he hears that Jon has been named king in the north. Sam is happy for Jon, although he knows he didn't take the crown because he wanted it. No, Jon had his chance. Sam knows Jon took the crown in order to lead the charge against the White Walkers and to try and protect others. We return to Winterfell for Brienne 1, where it's going to be that duel between Arya and Brienne in Season 7 where they just practice. I like that a lot, and it reminds us that Brienne swore to protect both Stark girls. After Brienne 1, we go to Dragonstone for Theon 1. Yeah, sorry for baiting you guys there. This chapter's just another reaction. Theon reacts to the Starks returning to Winterfell and Jon becoming king in the north. Theon reveals his deep regret for taking Winterfell from that family in a clash of kings. Theon knows he will never see them again, as they would kill him for all he's done, nor does Theon want to be forgiven. Finally catching up with the Lannisters, with the Queen in Castle Rock, Cersei, who's married to Euron Greyjoy by this point. Cersei 1 is her reacting to Jon and Daenerys' crownings at the ends of Winter. Upon hearing of these crownings, Cersei devolves further into madness and is going beyond reason, paralleling between her and the Mad King. She also further fears that Tyrion is coming for her, as Qyburn's little birds tell her that Tyrion is now handed the queen to Daenerys Targaryen. And from one insane Lannister to another, to one sane Lannister, it's the dwarf in Tyrion 1. This is where Daenerys orders Tyrion to gather her allies, and they make initial plans to take King's Landing from, now that Fagon is dead, the plans will need to be there just in case, for when Fagon still has a garrison there. The plans will take a while, and Daenerys needs to know who she has supporting her besides Asha's Ironborn. The finishing the Lannister trilogy of chapters is Jaime 1, or it's a very depressing chapter. If you remember from the last book, Jaime and Cersei effectively broke up while Jaime lost the last of his children. This leaves Jaime where he's just going around Westeros endlessly, and in this chapter he stops at the Golden Tooth, where Robb Stark captured him in Game of Thrones. Jaime is going through kind of a midlife crisis here, and he feels like he has no place in the world anymore. In Davos 1, we finally get to see some conflict, as this is the chapter where Davos learns that Melisandre burned Shireen to bring Jon back. Although they didn't know it would bring him back at the time, it leads into Jon 1, where he faces his first major decision as the king in the north. Execute Melisandre for killing a child, or keep her around and Jon loses his hand as a king, Davos. It seems easy, but considering Melisandre saved Jon's life, it's a difficult choice for Jon. The king in the north finds a common ground by sending Melisandre away from the north, and if she returns, she'll face death, kind of what we got in Season 6. And this is supposed to get the ball rolling towards Jon and Melisandre meeting. Next up is Arya 1, where we get another real talk scene between Jon and Arya. I placed this early partly because I want to do a lot of callbacks, as I think there will be a lot of callbacks here. Arya comforts Jon on having executed someone in Bran 1, but also she thinks that sending Melisandre was the right decision, and tells Jon that he did the right thing. Now, after Arya 1, there's a bit of a time gap as we go to Daenerys 1. In this chapter, we see Melisandre arrive on Dragonstone. It's more or less the same way as what she does in the show. When Melisandre arrives on Dragonstone, Melisandre convinces Daenerys to summon Jon Stark. Remember, Jon is a Stark by royal decree now, thanks to Robb, and he's also the king in the north. Also reminding us of the prince who was promised prophecy. Tyrion also mentions how the Lannisters executed Ned Stark and conspired to kill Robb Stark, pitting the Starks and Targaryens against the Lannisters. This leads into Sansa 1 and the last of the opening chapters to each character. In this chapter, Jon reads out the letter sent to them by Daenerys. Jon wants to accept, however, Sansa tries to get Jon to decline, but her efforts are unsuccessful, as Jon makes the point about dragon glass. They need it to survive. However, when Sansa asks Jon about Winterfell, Jon makes Sansa the Lady of Winterfell until Jon returns, as Rickon is only 6 years old by this point. Finally, we get on to the second chapters, where we start with Sam. After leaving Old Town, Sam doesn't really know where to go, as Randall Tarly will execute him for deserting the Night's Watch no matter the reason. Sam decides he should go north with Gilly, go to Winterfell to help in the fight against the White Walkers, for no matter the reason. The next two chapters work hand in hand with each other. First is Tyrion 2, which is basically Tyrion learning that Jon has accepted their offer to meet and is on course to Dragonstone. Tyrion reflects on when they last saw each other at the Wall. How far Jon has come, Tyrion thinks. It's a story that Tyrion will very much want to hear when he sees Jon again. Moving from one hand of King/Queen to the other, Davos Seaworth and Jon depart White Harbor for Dragonstone in Davos 2. Davos thinks of when he last visited White Harbor. It was when he had Rickon Stark in his position, and when Davos was last on Dragonstone, Stannis was alive, and Davos was hand to Stannis. A lot has changed since then, and now he's going with his king to meet the last Targaryen alive. Next is Cersei 2, where it follows Euron's campaign The Reachstone, more specifically Highgarden. Cersei and Euron plan together to take Highgarden. Euron will sail down the Mander and go via sea while the Lannister army is still in Castle Rock. Cersei will have one of her best commanders take the Lannister army down the ocean road, besieging Highgarden on two sides, land and sea. Cersei insists on brutality on Highgarden as she hates the Tyrells and would love to punished for everything that happens in a feast for crows. Euron is more than happy to grant this wish. The next set of 3 chapters starts with Arya 2. In this chapter, Arya leaves Winterfell temporarily to collect vengeance on one of the last names on her list, Walder Frey. Arya was at the Red Wedding, and now that Jon isn't there to stop her, she leaves Winterfell. This chapter is intertwined with Brienne 2, where she sees Arya leave, and Brienne unsuccessfully tries to convince Arya to stay. Brienne then goes to Sansa, telling her that Arya has left Winterfell, intending to kill Walder Frey the twins, which leads into Sansa 2, where Sansa talks with Littlefinger, who overheard this exchange. Littlefinger comes to Sansa privately, suggesting it to be treason. Sansa gives it a thought, but decides to dismiss Littlefinger from the room. However, this is the start of Littlefinger making inroads at dividing the Starks. But before we get to the moment everyone has been waiting for, I want to talk about Bran 2, where Bran confronts Howland Reed, who's still in Winterfell, and he wants to know the truth about Jon. Howland Reed confirms that Jon is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, so what Bran saw at the Tower of Joy in the Winds of Winter is true. Howland Reed also tells Bran that he didn't say anything, as Ned Stark commanded him to keep it a secret. Jon finally arrives on Dragonstone and reunites his Tyrion for Jon too. It's the same as in the show. We get the Bastard of Winterfell as Dwarf of Castle Rock scene, and Jon also hears the roar of Daenerys' 3 dragons. Finally, the moment we've been all waiting for. After so many fucking books, in Daenerys 2, Daenerys Targaryen and Jon Snow finally meet. Jon refuses to bend the knee, as he's king in the north, and warns Daenerys about the White Walkers. However, one thing that's different from the show, I think Daenerys is going to be immediately attracted to Jon. She's at love at first sight. Based on they were only meet the last book, I'm kind of sure that they have to be a love at first sight thing, because they don't have the time to build this out. unlike the show where they had 2 seasons. But finally, Jon and Daenerys meet at last. No, this video isn't over. I have a lot more planned for part 1 of my Dream of Spring predictions. Finally, I'll finish up with the second of my second chapters with Jaime 2, where Jaime stops at the inn of the crosses where he hears the news about the White Walkers marching on the wall. Jaime decides, let me go and win some honor for myself, and rides north to help in any way he can. Now, we start with the final plot point of this video, the beginning of the end of the first act of the book, and when Daenerys takes King's Landing. This starts with a new POV character of the book being Asha Greyjoy, or as the show calls her, Yara Greyjoy. Daenerys' small council makes plans to take King's Landing. Asha is to surround the city with the ships she has and Daenerys' ships. The plan is made Tyrion's idea, but there is a lot less bloodshed to it and no pointless expedition to Castle Rock. As for Daenerys herself, she is to surround the city with her 3 dragons. Combined with the Unsullied at the gates, King's Landing will have no choice but to surrender to the one true queen, Daenerys Targaryen. Very much resembling how Rhaenyra took King's Landing. The next chapter we go up north for Arya 3, where it's iconic, where Arya kills Walder Frey and gets revenge for Robb's death. It's too iconic to not include here. However, when Arya is leaving, she leaves the twins with Robb's bones. She finds Robb's bones and is on her way back to Winterfell, so the whole family can be reunited at last. We return to the preparations to take King's Landing with Tyrion 3. In this chapter, it involves Tyrion talking to both Jon and Daenerys, trying to get them on the same page, and they're able to strike a deal. As currently, despite they both love each other, Jon doesn't want to give up the crown, and Daenerys won't allow him to mine Dragonglass without bending the knee. Tyrion persuades Daenerys to allow Jon to mine the Dragonglass for the same reason as he does in the show. It's no harm to Daenerys if Jon finds Dragonglass, and it's no harm if he doesn't. In Cersei 3, Cersei learns that Euron has taken Highgarden from the Tyrells. Sir Garland Tyrell is attempting to muster forces throughout the Reach to take back the Reach's capital. Cersei hates the Tyrells, so I could easily see this happen, and Euron is a menace in the books. Following this is the last chapter before Daenerys takes King's Landing, being Theon 2. Theon is sailing through Blackwater Bay. Finally, another moment we've all been waiting for. Daenerys 3, where Daenerys takes back King's Landing. Daenerys uses her dragons to surround the city. Daenerys rides Drogon around the city walls, and eventually the city falls. Daenerys takes King's Landing in the same way that Rhaenyra takes King's Landing, like I said earlier. This leads into Davos 3, where Davos and Jon are on Dragonstone, where they receive the news that Daenerys has taken King's Landing and rules as the Queen of the 7 Kingdoms. She commands the 2 of them to come to King's Landing, and Jon commands Davos, saying they will go, because it's very obvious he's deep in love with Daenerys, whereas Davos just wants to go to King's Landing to see his wife again. In Jon 3, it's the last of the Daenerys taking King's Landing chapters, where Jon watches from a distance as Daenerys gets her crowning of the Queen of the 7 Kingdoms. Jon is later summoned to Daenerys' bedchambers. This is where they have finally opened up to each other. They confess their love for each other, and they end up having sex, which is very important for part 2 of my Dream of Spring predictions. And some of you might be able to tell where I'm already going with this, as it's very obvious that Jon and Daenerys are going to have a certain something by the end of the books. The important thing is that Jon and Daenerys agreed to a marriage pact, and they will marry when the White Walkers are defeated. This is where Jon effectively bends the knee and accepts Daenerys as the one true queen. Jon 3 here is probably the most important chapter for parts 2 and 3 of my Dream of Spring predictions. It gets the wheels in motion that'll change everything. We return to Winterfell for Sansa 3, where she receives the news that Jon bent the knee towards Daenerys, who is now the Queen of the 7 Kingdoms. The news reaches Winterfell. Sansa learns that Jon and Daenerys agreed to betroth each other. Sansa is not happy with Jon, and Littlefinger tries to get Jon disposed as king in the north, but Sansa once again says no. Sansa knows that the Northern Lords aren't going to be happy with Jon, and she'll have to deal with the aftermath. Finally, we end part 1 of 3 with the same character who started this video, Bran. In Bran 3, Bran uses his abilities as the Three-Eyed Raven to warg into a bird in King's Landing, where suspicions come true that Jon loves Daenerys. He sees the evidence of Jon 3, and Bran knows they are committing incest, as he knows the truth. Daenerys is Jon's aunt, and Jon is Daenerys' nephew. That does it for part 1 of 3 of my Dream of Spring predictions. In this part, Jon and Daenerys finally met and agreed to betroth each other. I don't know how to say that. Daenerys also takes King's Landing, while Sansa rose to become the Lady of Winterfell, and Arya got revenge for Robb's death. Theon met Jon again and helped Daenerys take King's Landing. However, the wars down south aren't over yet, and that'll be the main focus of part 2 coming in September. I just want to say I'm recording from college now. I'm a college man. I don't want to say what college I'm at, but for the future, I'm trying to be doing 2 videos a week, and the amount of shorts will stay the same week. Going forward, I'm going to try and focus on my bigger projects, and with the next upload being, what if Jacaerys Valerion married Helena? But until then, bye!